London.
CBS News Radio correspondent Robert Berger has been following the Syrian conflict. He joins us by phone from Jerusalem. Robert, we have seen an unbelievable amount of violence escalating in this particular area. What is behind the surge and the killing?
Well, this suburb of Damascus is basically it's the last rebel stronghold near the Syrian capital. And the Syrian government is trying to end this war. It's already got the upper hand, so it wants to drive about 3,000 or so rebels from this area known as Ghouta, Eastern Ghouta, where there are also something like 400,000 people living. So they have been that is, the Syrian regime has been bombarding this area with artillery, airstrikes, including warplanes and helicopters.
Robert, a September deal between Russia, Turkey, and Iran established Eastern Ghouta as a de-escalation zone for 6 months, meaning it should be a safe place for civilians to live. Why was that agreement not extended?
I think that Syrian President Bashar Assad is trying to drive these rebels out. They are a threat. I mean, Damascus is the capital. Most of the rebel strongholds now are pretty far away from Damascus. So these rebels are holed up there. And I think the world isn't that interested, and basically the Russians and the Syrian regime can pretty much do what they want without a whole lot of international opposition. And so I think they've decided to go ahead with this offensive. And apparently this is just the beginning. There's wide speculation here in the region that the plan is to go in on the ground and to try and kick these rebels out of the area.
Robert, the pictures that we're looking at are just completely bombed out buildings and terrified children and people trying to get out of harm's way. We've heard of the dozens of airstrikes. We've heard hospitals being bombed recently. As you know, next month marks 7 years since the Syrian civil war began. Where does this conflict stand? And as you mentioned, if the world isn't that interested, when and how does this come to an end?
Well, it all changed when the Russians decided to intervene. We all know that that was about 2 years ago. Or a year and a half maybe. Before then, the United States really didn't do anything. The international community didn't do anything. And the Russians came in and tilted the war that Bashar al-Assad was losing back in his favor. So it looks like, the Syrian regime, backed by Russia and Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon, are going to win this war. But still, Syria is still a very fractured country. There are still some rebel strongholds left. ISIS has been pretty much kicked out, but I mean, looking down the road, I think, that Bashar al-Assad is probably going to remain in power, backed by Russia. Iran is going to be a presence there. Mm-hmm. And at some point, perhaps, they'll try and get some kind of an agreement in place between the world powers that sort of settles the situation down.
It's hard to look at those pictures. I want to ask you about another topic, and we want to talk about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Last week, Israeli police said they had enough evidence to indict Netanyahu on charges of fraud, bribery, and breach of trust. Now, Israeli police have arrested several members of his inner circle as part of a widening inquiry into whether Netanyahu traded favors for favorable news coverage. Robert, what's the latest on this investigation?
Right. You mentioned those two scandals last week. Now, today, there are two more, including members of his inner circle. In one of these cases, a member, a close associate, allegedly bribed a judge in exchange for dropping a case against Netanyahu's wife, who's suspected of extravagant expenditures, household expenditures at public expense. And the other case involves two associates who allegedly promoted the interests of a top Israeli company, the Israeli telecom company Bezek, in exchange for more positive coverage of Netanyahu on a popular news website.
All right, CBS News Radio correspondent Robert Berger. We have to leave it there for now. Reporting from Jerusalem. We appreciate your time.